You are tuning in to Access Live, a show about raising awareness, what's going on in the community, and to address the issues that impact youth and their families that have serious emotional and behavioral challenges. We are located at the Brookins Building at 1776 East Washington in Urbana, Illinois, and at the downtown location at 202 West Park Street.
And good afternoon. You're listening to Access Live, a community education and engagement initiative of the Access Initiative. So happy you've joined us again today. And while it's a bit frosty out there, it's a little bit warmer than it was yesterday, I think.
It's cold.
Okay, I know. I'm a solar baby. I'm with you. That familiar voice you hear is, of course, Mr. Tracy Parsons, the director of the Access Initiative. So in this hour, we're going to be talking about what's new and good, what we need to keep our eyes on. We hope you'll give us a call at 359-9227 to tell us what's on your mind. That's why Tracy's here, is to share with you and get feedback from you. Of course, we're specifically concerned with the mental and emotional health of the African American community, but we know that is broadly defined. So whatever is on your mind, the phones are open at 359-9227 to take a chance today to talk with the director. So, Mr. Director Tracy Parsons, I can't believe it's already getting to be late November.
Well, I know. Thanks for having me back on. You know, last time I was here, I don't know how long ago it was. It seems like it wasn't that long, but
I know.
Probably a few weeks ago. And so we talked about coming back regularly to keep folks engaged and aware of what's happening with us as we continue to talk about our sustaining those parts of the work that are really important, and we've made a good, established a good footprint to work from, and you know, just make sure people are aware.
Yeah. So let's do this. In case there are any new listeners today, why don't you give us just a brief synopsis of what this multi-year effort has been for the Access Initiative? And of course, we want to keep in mind that we are in the winding down phase. And so what was Access about? Now that we're transitioning out, what are we dealing with? What are we looking at? What should the community know and engage?
Well, great question. You know, I think that whole narrative about what we are, what we've done, who we were to serve, what we were intended to do, you know, it means a lot of different things to a number of different folks. And I think that's been part of the challenge as well as the opportunity to help folks understand what we were attempting to do. And so we're at a great place because we've now got some of the data that we can start talking about and show the impact that we've had for kids and their families and the impact on our community. But Access is part of, it's a national demonstration project, which means, you know, there are a number of communities that are funded through the federal government, the Substance Abuse, Mental Health Agency, SAMHSA is what they're titled. And we received, they call them cooperative agreements instead of a grant.
Right.
But so we were awarded an opportunity to receive the federal funding 6 years ago. And that was really on the heels of a lot of work that had been done for a number of years prior to my joining.
Project Access.
Project Access. And it really is an extension of work that we've been doing in this community for about 20-something years now.
Right.
And it adds an interesting dynamic of looking at mental and behavioral health, spiritual health, wellness, as an interesting component to my community involvement and community engagement work that I've been doing throughout my career. And so we're in year 6 of a 6-year project. We were funded to do 4 different things. So one was to help build what we call an infrastructure.
Yes.
Can we get organizations working together? Can we get those that provide services to our kids and families talking amongst each other, working together, doing something that we call collaborative processing? So that's part of it. The second part was really looking at what we have as part of, we call our service array, which really means what kind of services and programs do we have? How are the kids and families connected to them? How are they connected to one another? Are they using best practices? Or are they programs that good people have got together to just think about something to do, or have they really done some research or some education to know the impact of their programming?
Do they know what actually
Do
works?
they actually know what works, and is the programming that they do making a difference? The other part is evaluating all of this stuff. And so that's an important part of the work. And then the
Because there's been local and national evaluation.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so we participate in both, and able to look at the work we're doing here locally and see its impact, see its importance, its value, and be able to measure that, which is really critical. And then the final part of the work is really just building the community up itself. So those that we work with, those that we're working on behalf of, how are we building them up? How are we doing that? So it's really a four parts to the work.
Would you call that last part sort of like family and community empowerment?
Yeah.
That would be our language our audience
right.
would, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we've been doing for the last few years, and we're winding down on it. So now we want to be able to really evaluate and look at what we've done well, where are the gaps that continue, what are the things we want to build upon to keep serving our kids and families better than we've been doing.
So let me ask you this, or let's clarify for our audience.
Yeah.
So there are various levels at which Access has been doing the work. So on one level, we know there was this specificity around who qualifies, right? So 10 to 18 years old with an SED or serious emotional disturbance, diagnosis, right? So that's very specific. So that was very specific to what kids and families sort of got direct service and wraparound plans. Then there's another level at which Access has been trying to work that's at the more sort of systems level, right?
Yes.
Just sort of building the coalitions, partnerships, looking at all of that, and that sort of fell under building the infrastructure and the service array. And then there's the sort of universal interventions, like this show is a universal intervention. Mm-hmm. It's for anybody who can get on the radio dial or on the internet.
Yeah.
That's more broadly committed to the mental health and healing of the Black community. So operating on those three levels.
Yeah, and that's really what's important. I think there was always a lot of question about what it was, and I think there's folks that, tend to always say, okay, well, how many kids are you serving? We want numbers.
We call that bean count.
Right.
Yeah.
We want to know how many kids came through the doors and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, that's not what this project is. We are working with kids with the most complex situations. They're dealing with the most difficult family situations, school situations, involved in court services or foster care. All of these different things contribute to what's happening with the kids. And so if it's just about running them through a process of, we saw them, we served them, we referred them, and boom, we're happy.
That's what's wrong now, right? Yeah.
And so it's been interesting trying to get folks to understand the difference. And but I think that's also the opportunity. So as I was sharing, we've now have data. We now have information that we can start to share, start to paint the picture, start to provide more clarity.
Yeah.
And so when you think about probably the most difficult cases or most complex cases you've heard over the last couple of years that involve kids and shooting or calling kids and discipline issues, those have probably been our kids,
Right. So kids who the Access Initiative has served and are wrapping up or passing on are kids and families who we call involved in multiple systems, right? That's why you do the systems level work too, right? So probably problems at home, problems at school, maybe problems with juvenile justice, a mental health diagnosis or misdiagnosis,
Yeah.
right? So all that stuff coming together is what you mean by how complex it is.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then those that come to the table with that. So then what happens? There's a long sort of intake process to completely assess their situation, their family situation. A team is put together. Give people a sense of sort of what that is.
Yeah, I think what we've wanted to do was hopefully connect kids in a different way than what they've been previously dealt with or what they're used to. So we went through the process to not only bring the youth in, but bring their family members in. We wanted to do, in the direct service part of our work, was something called wraparound,
Yeah.
which means we want to bring the whole support network around the kids. So it could be pastor, teacher, friend, cousin, aunt, uncle, grandmother, caseworker, probation officer, whoever it might be. Bring that all together and form a team, form a support network around this kid and their family to hopefully help them then navigate whatever challenges or issues that they're working
So
with.
when it works well, think of an example or two when it's like, yes, we knew this was the right thing to do. Well, obviously we're not using names, but
Yeah.
to give people a sense of when it works well, this is what it looks like.
Well, I like the idea around, and again, kids came to us from a number of different ways, but I really like the idea around connecting kids through school.
Yeah.
Because the school really is the first place many of the challenges surfaces.
That's right.
And so in an ideal situation, the school would say, we've got John Doe over here, he's struggling in school, he's not here very often, and when he is here, he's just struggling. He can't sit in his seat, or he's got some other issues, or he's angry, or he's been getting in fights, or whatever the scenario is. I mean, we wanted kids from, we wanted the most difficult kids.
Give us the hard
Give us
ones.
the ones that nobody else wants,
That's
and
right.
everyone's ready to throw away. That's who we want. And so we bring the kid in, the young person in, have a chance to sit down and talk with them, hopefully figure out who their caregiver or what their family situations are. Imani, that's the interesting part, is just the number of different ways that our kids and families live today. The traditional way, or what we know that we saw.
Nuclear family.
Yeah, that stuff doesn't exist as
That's
much.
right.
And so we want to be able to, again, catch the kid. And so identify what the challenge is. Maybe he or she's not coming to school because they're anxious about it. I mean, we saw a number of kids that were dealing with anxiety-type disorders about school, about being in the public,
And
dealing with people.
anxiety is more than wringing your hands. You're
Yeah.
talking about something that
Oh, yeah,
diagnosable.
yeah.
It's
Oh,
more
yeah,
than I'm
sure.
nervous.
Yeah, or physically, not able to, go to school or deal with
Just
what the
can feel
Sure,
paralyzed
that's
about
right.
it, right?
And so once they are there, then they're forced to have to deal with the things that they're anxious about or they're challenged about. And so finding out what that is, finding out how we help them with that situation, put the supports in place to help them navigate whatever their challenges are, and then hopefully disrupt or stop those things that are going to negatively impact them. So being kicked out of school, being ostracized from their family or kicked out of their family. How do we help and support bring all that together? And so those are the types of situations that we've dealt with, and the
So
types
it's
of kids.
real relationship based.
Absolutely.
It's a lot about mending relationships, renegotiating relationships, creating new relationships.
I think all of that, and so some of the things we'd maybe take for granted that we naturally have, natural resources or natural relationships that we have in our lives, we take it for granted that
Yeah.
everyone has that,
It
or
breaks
it's that,
down.
or it's that easy for everyone to have those things. And so we found that for many families, they need our assistance in helping just make those types of connections. And so I'm just giving a general
Yeah.
example there. I mean, we really could again see a young person who's actually committed a crime.
Yeah.
And so we get the young person from the fact that they've now got themselves caught in the juvenile justice
Yeah.
system by the crime that they've committed. We also just have folks that have, we haven't talked a lot in historically in our community about mental health
Right.
and behavioral health and those challenges that brings. to our communities, to our families, to our neighborhoods. We've not wanted to talk about it openly and honestly. So I think we've done a great job of helping bring this topic, this issue of mental and behavioral health, in a higher level.
So as you reflect on this past 6 years, do you feel there's a palpable difference in the level of it being stigmatized? It feels less stigmatized than it did 6 years ago, would you say?
Well, I think there's been a number of things that have happened to help with that. So my first response is yes.
Yeah.
I do believe that we have helped raise the level of awareness, consciousness about mental health. You know, there's been a number of national shootings, issues, those types of things that have helped create conversation and awareness. We've had a number of, our rise in youth violence and youth-related activities around violence and those things have also been occurring and happening at the same time, which again helps with people's awareness and being in tune with this type of issue or the fact around it. So I think our intentional work and then the unintentional things, the fact that we're here every week talking about it in a number of different ways.
Come at it every way we
right?
can, right?
That's right. So people used to say, Tracy, what are you doing now, or where are you at now? Now they say, oh, wow, I hear, they might not know specifically, but they know that, there's buzz. There's buzz and there's involvement.
So I was in a very encouraging conversation with some school district, Champaign School District folk yesterday. And we were talking about a specific elementary school where the demographics of the school have changed over the last few years. You all remember demographics means like race, class, gender, that kind of thing, sort of what the population looks like. So it's become increasingly low income, increasingly black, etc., and increasingly troubled. And the thing that I loved as we were talking, they completely got there's been a lot more disruption, kids being disruptive, et cetera, but enough work has been done that these people they didn't talk about it like bad kids, right? They really got and even used the language around trauma, right? So we can see very concrete signs of the partnership and collaboration work that Access has been trying to do. So they were talking with me about what can we do, how can we even do it better, and it wasn't victim blaming.
Yeah.
It wasn't blaming kids and families. They got that it had so much to do with history and racial disproportionality and disparity, and there was so much to do with when we see kids acting out, they're acting out their trauma, right? And until we address their trauma, we're just going to keep going around in circles. And they got that, and I love that, and I think Access has something to do with that.
Well, I think that's the exciting part, is that we know that we've established a footprint and we've got some exciting things happening. And I was in a meeting yesterday that had representation from police, schools, community agencies, talking about this issue of trauma. And how do we make sure that our community is more trauma-informed and we infuse trauma-informed practices, throughout our agencies, our community work, those of us that work with families and in our community, and this notion of the impact of trauma is on all of us.
That's
and it impacts all of us.
That's right.
And
but
so
it lands in schools in a way that it doesn't land in other places, which brings us back to what you said. When you deal with it on that level, that's a good comprehensive place to try to reach kids and families.
I just think the key around education is so important. So while I'm excited about the successes and the impact and the foundation that's been laid, we still got a lot of work to do.
We got a lot of work to do. We're going to take a quick break.
Yeah, that's a good place.
Yes, it's a good transition place, right? We planned it that way.
Right.
Yeah, no, Sam's going to cut us off in a minute is what it is. So everyone, we're going to take a quick break. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.
Access Live can be heard every Wednesday afternoon from 2 to 3 p.m. on WBCP 1580 AM in Champaign-Urbana. You can learn more about the Access Initiative by visiting their website at www.access-initiative2.org.
This is Imani Bazzell, your host for Access Live, the Community Education and Engagement Initiative of the Access Initiative. This afternoon in the studio, we have the director of the Access Initiative, Tracy Parsons. And before the break, Tracy, we were talking about the success of bringing the different systems together who are in our kids' lives, who have historically maybe not been in our kids' lives in a good way, and the work that the Access Initiative initiated and is bringing full circle. I said to you on the break that 6 years ago, people weren't even using this language.
Right.
And so there are some very tangible things. People want a bean count, but there are other things that are intangible. And like you said, you were just in a meeting yesterday with who? Just tell that again. You were police.
Well, yeah, I mean,
school,
it was community organizations, the university, folks were there, police, schools, and we're talking about how do we, encourage, push, educate, engage our community in this whole notion of being trauma informed.
Yes.
And I told them I'm part of this national listserv, and it was exciting to look over the weekend to see a community somewhere in Texas say that this community, we are now trauma informed, and we're buying into it as a community. And I just thought that was powerful.
That's lovely, because it's the opposite of the victim blaming approach, right?
Absolutely.
If people want to understand it, just think about that old way of doing things and saying this is the answer or the antidote to that craziness.
Well, it's interesting because, again, as I shared, as much success or as much progress as I think we're making, black kids are still suffering.
Still hurt.
Black families are still struggling, and we're still disproportionately negatively impacted so far off the radar screen.
And still persistently traumatized.
Right, absolutely. And so, if you think about Ferguson, if you think about here in our community, we've had 3 shootings 3 weeks in a row. Young brother was killed, earlier in the week. They found in his car yesterday. Went to Champaign Central High School. Played involved in athletics. Family, well known in the community.
Handsome kid.
Great looking. Yeah. And so when you think about an event or an incident like that, that traumatizes an entire community. It traumatizes. So Central High School is having to deal with it today. The family members are having to deal with it today. All the young folks that had touched this young person, are now like, oh, and so.
But that didn't happen a few years ago.
That's right.
That's the good news.
Right.
The bad news is that another death.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
The good news is there was a time when our kids and families were being traumatized by this kind of thing and systems didn't respond.
Yeah.
And now the level of education has gone up to understand we've got to address this right away.
And the really scary part, is that this stuff could be normalized too much in our community.
Right.
And just seen as a way of life. Or
Finding a black kid dead in a car should never be normal.
Right.
We should always be outraged and disturbed and want to go to action.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
Let's not make this too comfortable.
Right.
Well, that's just the way it is. No. If it's that way, that's wrong. Let's do something different so it's not.
A kid gets shot and young person gets shot in the front yard at 6 o'clock in the evening with young kids out on their bikes playing in the neighborhood. That's unacceptable.
That's not normal.
That's not normal.
We're about bringing some normalcy, right?
Absolutely.
So speaking of Ferguson then, we know everybody knows it's been in the news a lot because the grand jury is expected to bring down its verdict soon, whether or not it's going to indict this officer.
Not to prejudge, but it seems like they're not going to indict him, huh? It looks like it's leaning that way.
It does look like it's leaning that way. Yeah. And because everybody knows it looks like it's leaning that way. Now let's back up.
Okay.
Let's deal with this. Okay. So the reason we think it looks that way is because there have been these series of leaks, right? And all the leaks have suggested that somehow they're being given all of this proof that it wasn't the officer's fault. But every time the so-called proof gets analyzed, you realize it's not proof of anything.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
So, but we know that, quote unquote, the man or the system has this way of scandalizing, of villainizing the victim.
Sure.
Especially when it comes to black folks and black boys and black men. So here we've got this kid, this black youth, who has been shot multiple times by a police officer who's unarmed. The community is still, it's been over 100 days now. I think this Saturday may have been 100 days. So, wow, the community is still not healed. But now we have this understanding that, oh, okay, what's happening not just in Ferguson, you know, ground zero, but what then reverberates out that we're feeling the same thing here. We're feeling traumatized too about what happened there because it's happening everywhere. But now that we have the language and some understanding about what we're experiencing and what you can do about trauma is the good news. So I was telling you during the break, I was telling Tracy that I was at a conference at the end of last week and went to, this was about community schools, about doing school differently. And there's a community schools model you'll be hearing more about in Champaign because we're going to be taking that approach. But I went to a trauma-informed workshop at this forum. And so we still have to remember that this is language people are using, but they don't always mean exactly the same thing. So I was telling Tracy that you know, my blood got to boiling because some people's approach is still this very individualistic. This child, and they think about it like an event, like maybe a child was bullied or a child was hurt or a child's parent died, you know, these sort of events that a child is traumatized around, and then what does the trauma-informed intervention look like to help that individual child cope with that trauma? Well, when we're talking about poor people, when we're talking about African American communities, we're not necessarily talking about events. There are events like somebody being shot and killed, but there is this historical trauma, this trauma that's never been resolved, that just keeps getting, it's like a scab that won't heal, and you just keep falling down and scab on top of scab on top of scab. So that's a very complex kind of trauma to look at, but we've got to be able to see it through that lens because we don't just talk about a trauma-informed approach here in Champaign County. We talk about trauma and justice-informed, which is different. And so I said, I was saying things in the workshop. I wasn't trying to disrupt. I promise I wasn't. But somehow.
Yes, right.
And I'm just saying, so I finally got them to say that what they were doing was showing people one model of being trauma-informed. But you can't tell people this is what it is. You can say this is how we do it, but let me offer you some other ways. So remember we had the sanctuary folks come and they named that, well, yes, there's the sanctuary model. I'm like, yes, exactly. Tell people there are other ways of looking at this. And so I gave the example. I said, now the way you all are talking about, say we're in Ferguson, right? When I think about using your model that's so individualistic, how does that deal with the community's trauma? And maybe with another model of thinking about being trauma and justice informed, part of the intervention is giving people a chance to speak up and speak out and protest. Maybe folks need a prescription for, a protest sign. Isn't that a part of healing from trauma?
Well,
what about that?
Well, no, I agree with you. I agree with you. And, part of, I started off talking about building this infrastructure. And why I think that's so key is we've always had things or stuff or programs or, the new flavor of the month that's going to address this. And the reason I believe they always all fail is because they're the individual approach that you're talking about versus really looking at our systemic structural way that we operate, the way that we engage,
and
the way that we involve.
as a community.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, because we've not been part of the community.
We haven't had a seat at the table.
Right. We've always been forced to be on the outside. So when you talked about being at this meeting and having to take a role, I feel that very same way. You know, the last month, 6 weeks, I feel like every meeting I've been in, I've had to say, no, this is not acceptable. This is not going to be just business as usual.
Right.
We're not going to forget about these kids. We're not going to forget about black kids specifically, and saying that.
That's
having
right.
to say that.
That's right. No
because
euphemisms.
Because it's so easy to talk about things in terms of all kids. It's so easy to talk about things in these ways that exclude us and keep us away from those things that are going to help solve.
Or dilute us. Oh, let's just throw everybody together. We're concerned about everybody. That's really good. But to solve problems, we have to be specific and targeted, right?
Yes.
At the same time. So there are universal things like this show is a universal intervention for everybody, but you also do targeted and specific trauma and justice informed work.
Well, it's universal for everybody, but we have to do it through Black radio.
That's right.
Because
and we don't apologize.
No, you shouldn't apologize for it. And then those opportunities for our issues to be covered through mainstream issue are just so limited and so reduced.
And the real key, what I hear you saying, this whole question about being at the table and being locked out, to be able to make a difference is not just about, course, getting it second and third hand definitely doesn't work, and we've had private conversations about that and being put in those positions. But we have to be a part of actually defining the question, because how you name something or the question that gets asked put you in the direction of what solutions can be reached. So we can't just be a part of solving problems. We have to be a part of naming what the actual problems are, because in our estimation, the problems have been misnamed and misdiagnosed. And so a part of this is about, let's name things what they really are if we actually want to solve them, right?
No doubt about it.
So back to this Ferguson thing. So a lot of people have been seeing that it's back in the news again because the grand jury will be coming up with their decision soon. And so given all of this trauma that everybody's experienced, this over 100 days of concern and direct action and people finally finding their voice and talking back, etc., the governor declares a state of emergency. And we know what that's about. That's about those people are savages and we can't have them tearing up our stuff. And so I'm alerting the National Guard and all the local law enforcement agencies to be on alert. And that's not about being on alert to support us. That's about being on alert to keep us down and keep us quelled.
Right.
Because the community, if people have been following, I hope that we have, has come together and tried to work with law enforcement and say, this is what we would like to see. This is how you can help protect our First Amendment right of freedom of speech, our freedom of assembly. Those things are not against the law. So how is law enforcement being used to ensure we can gather, to give us the most amount of space that you can, instead of crowding us out, making up your own laws, telling us we can't assemble? So the community has submitted like 19 points that it wants law enforcement to agree to in handling whatever may come of this. So they've been in discussions about that, and there's been a lot of talk about law enforcement has gotten 500 extra hours of training and all. The problem is their training has been on how to use tear gas better and how to use, all your weapons that are supposed to be used on the battlefield, how to use them in urban environments. That's not the training we were asking for. So you're getting better at turning police officers into soldiers instead of turning police officers into peace officers. Because that's what we used to call them, right?
Yeah.
Officer of the peace.
Well, I think Ferguson has served as a model in a number of different ways of what not to do.
Yeah.
And so I've been real pleased with the level of communication I've had with the police chiefs and the leadership of the cities to talk about just what you're referencing.
So tell us about those conversations.
Well, first of all, we've formed something called the Community Coalition. This formed after the Kewan shooting.
Kewan
Carrington shooting and killing that we had here in our own community, our Ferguson, per se.
Ferguson, that's right.
And so I think what has come out of that is a way of improving and strengthening the communication between community and police. And so I've had several conversations, again, with our police leadership around how do we support and allow, first of all, we don't know the level of interest that our local community will have, but how will we allow folks to express themselves? And just as you were talking about, how does the police help support that and keep that safe? And so we've had those conversations. I think we're prepared, and it's not coming from a police state. I think that's the most important part that I would want to share with our community, that our conversations are from that place.
Yeah.
And so I think our police, again, while they don't do everything right, and I know we still got a number of things we're working on to clean up that needs to be cleaned up, I think we're addressing them from a out in front of it place versus just reactionary. And so, I want to encourage folks. It's the second Wednesday of the month. We meet at 3:30. The meetings are at the police department. And
on
First Street, Champaign
Everybody
Police.
can come.
Anybody can come. Everybody can come. And what we're talking about is how we strengthen our community, how we strengthen our police-community relations, how we deal with those in-the-moment incidents. So, again, like I said, we've had 3 shootings 3 weeks in a row here in our community. The last 2 have resulted in deaths for those involved, and that's unacceptable for our community.
It's unacceptable.
So I think it's just important that, again, we are addressing and working and talking about these issues versus just reacting when something happens.
Right, so we aren't operating always in crisis mode.
Yeah, so as you talked about yesterday, you're meeting with the schools about future, about opportunity, about what direction are we going. I think those are the important conversations that we have to be a part of, and in many situations leading.
And this has everything to do with African American mental health and healing.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Doesn't sound like it, only when you're not looking through the right lens. Then
Right.
you realize it has everything to do with that. So we're going to take another quick break. You all stand by. We'll be right back.
The Access Initiative mission is to build a trauma and justice-informed system of care designed to create a healed community that works to ensure that youth and their families are resilient, resourceful, responsible, and restored.
We're back. This is Imani Bazzell, your host for Access Live, a community education and engagement initiative of the Access Initiative. I'm so pleased to share our in-studio guest with you today. That's Mr. Tracy Parsons, the director of the Access Initiative. So we've got a caller, and we're so excited about that. Hello, caller.
How you doing, Imani? How you doing, Tracy?
Tara, what's happening?
Wonderful. What's on your mind?
I got a few things on my mind. Let me turn on radio. Sorry about that.
Okay.
When we're talking about the Ferguson thing, we already knew that ruling was going to come in our favor of the things that we see going on to over 100 days for them even say anything. And for them to get the National Guards and stuff that ready, get them ready in St. Louis. I think to them from not charging that man, which I wish they would, but that'd be how they could shut it down, just have it kept in Ferguson. Them not charging, it's going to go nationwide.
I believe so. Yeah.
And it's going to be the young people. And I heard Tracy talking about they have a meeting at the police station on Wednesday. If we ain't got the people at the table that these things are happening to, can't solve the problem if we ain't got the.
So let's get them. Let's get them.
Yeah, we need to get them in the room with
That's
with
right.
the conversation.
So what would be one of your ideas, one or two of your ideas? This is Martell Miller, everyone, if you didn't recognize his voice. What do you see would get us closer to getting more young people at such a table?
But some of us need to get out the way and find the ones that want to be a part of it, you know, because we got some people that sit at these tables that sit there and listen and talk and don't do any work towards solving the problem. It's like, I got this position and I'm a community leader.
Okay. So we want some people to scoot over. Do you believe that we are doing the work we need to do around youth leadership development, so we got some kids who can be at the table and can articulate what their position is and what they want to see happen?
Not only we're dealing with kids, the thing we're dealing with is the 18 to 35 year
Yes.
The one that's unemployment, the one that was miseducated.
That's right.
The ones that's going through the troubles.
Yes, absolutely.
And when we're talking about them, it's like we're right now in Champaign. We can solve a big problem in our community if the university would hire right and have a percentage of us that are 816 of us working for them, about 2,500 of us working or more.
Somebody's been studying their data.
And that would change the dynamics of a community because we have a lot more people working.
Okay,
and
so
you have economic development and you have poor like we got in our community and the underpaid. That leads to crime, that leads to drug dealing, that leads to so much stuff that you got to make ends meet. And we need to hold some of these people, I call it corporate racism.
okay.
So,
Let's give Tracy a chance to respond. Tracy, this meeting that you say happens on the second Wednesday at 3:30 of every month over on First Street, from what Martell just described, does that feel like the forum where these kind of discussions are happening, can happen? What do you say?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the right part. I think if we were able to have identified youth that were able to serve in that kind of leadership role and articulate what the challenges and issues are from a youth perspective, I think that would be really key for a group like that. With what Martell is talking about, I think those meetings need to happen in the neighborhood. Those meetings need to happen where those youth are, so that we're able to connect with them in a different way, in a different place. So I think they're two separate groups and two separate meetings. And I think he's exactly right. We got to figure out how to engage the young folks that are not engaged.
And that 19 to 35, you got those numbers right. And actually in the world, when you're in the global arena and they use the term youth, that's actually who they're talking about, Martell. So on the global scale, you're right on target. That the rest of the world thinks of people as even as old as 35 is still they're classifying as young people whose voices need to be heard.
And so the other part that Martell's not remembering or connecting from my parts is that my conversation it's just a start.
Yeah.
So I think we just got a footprint in place to be able to engage the way that he's talking about and the need to be able to do that.
Well, Martell, I think, your call is wonderful. You're always on point. And we heard you say that economic development is critical, that access to living wage jobs is important, and places like the university as an institution are an example of folks who need to have better outreach programs that can increase African Americans' entree into university employment. So I think you're on point there, and we've got another caller. Did you want to make another point?
Can I say something?
Please do.
I'm gonna have a radio show starting Tuesday on 105.5.
What time?
It's gonna be 11 to 1.
11 to 1 on Tuesdays.
So this coming Tuesday is gonna be called Change the Game.
Change the game.
I love it.
Great. And you call in every week here and remind folks, okay?
And I'm at a website. I'm working on my website right now.
All right.
I love it.
Let's check this other call.
Okay, thank you, hon. Bye-bye.
All right.
Hello, caller.
Good afternoon. How y'all doing,
Good
family?
afternoon. Can you turn your radio down a little bit?
I did. Is that better?
That's wonderful. Go for it.
Okay. All right. So I know we only have a few minutes. What's up, big brother, big sister? How y'all doing?
Hey, we
Hey,
good.
good to hear from you, bro.
This is Brother
the
Aaron
wake
Ammons, everyone.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much for announcing that. In the wake of this historic election that we just witnessed and were a part of and helped make happen,
Would
I
you
was
be
wondering-
speaking of the first African American to win the 103rd Representative District?
that's exactly what I'm talking
Uh-huh.
about. Yes, indeed. Our sister Carol Ammons. But I wanted to see it from a community perspective, and I was wondering from a mental health perspective, if you all, in your studies and the work that you've done over the years, and the context of this is that in Ferguson, I keep hearing about these turnouts and how by voting became a big response for them. They used the energy to get that accomplished or to start that down that road. And I was wondering from a mental health perspective, is the involvement of the African American community in politics one of the criteria that you all seen as a mark of a healthy community or not?
That's an excellent question. Tracy.
Well, there's no doubt that engagement is a critical part of our community's health and well-being and mental health. And so if you just go back and since we used Ferguson as the reference and we heard the minuscule amount of African Americans that had voted in previous elections and not been able to impact those who had been elected that were reaping these types of policies and procedures on the community. And so we've seen through Carol's election the value of the vote, the importance of the vote.
And the importance of people power, right?
Well, absolutely. And so, it was quite clear to me, Aaron, to attend her, historic celebration and ceremony and to see the foundation of her support, and to see, to me, and how I look at things, brother, of who's not in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And so as much as who's in the room. Mm-hmm. And so while we celebrate and appreciate and know that now we've got a soldier in a very key role in place, if she's just left to be isolated,
we can't let that happen.
She only have a minimal impact and not have the impact that she needs and will have without the support of all of us.
And that's the thing, Brother Aaron, that I appreciate about Sister Carol is she gets the mental health piece. She gets that a lot of what we're actually struggling around has so much to do with our mental health or lack thereof. And the stronger we get, politically and otherwise, those are manifestations of improving mental health.
Well, the key part about her election, Aaron, and the audience is that we've put a lot of folks in positions before. And we've supported a lot of folks that have got in and turned their backs on us, got in and didn't know who we were once we got them in these positions.
Your name again?
And so now to put someone in a place who we know is going to carry the message for us is just so much powerful, and it reinforces a different type of message. So those folks that have a history of not trusting
Yes.
supporting politics and voter participation, we now have the ability to change that traumatizing,
That's
that
because
historic
that's
trauma.
traumatizing, right? Being lied to all the time, being misrepresented, being not listened to, that's traumatizing. And so that's one of the reasons, like you said, Aaron, this campaign and win was historic because there was some mental health and healing going on, in fact. People who were engaged in this or even engaged in simply by following it and watching it, I think have a different level of a sense of what we call not even self-esteem. It's something deeper than that. It's what we call self-efficacy, what I believe I'm capable of doing and achieving. So that's a long way around to say, yes, our political engagement and well-being is directly connected to our mental health and healing.
Well, if you think about Carol's campaign from the standpoint of her making the decision and being in Carl Park in Urbana to make her decision to run, to seeing the polish, the experience that she gained, the expertise, to see, you know, that transition that she went through this campaign, to be personally attacked, to be, you know, to have all these things done to tear her down, but have those things build her strength.
That's right.
Oh, that, you know, Aaron, these are just powerful messages that our community has just learned, and we have to document this.
Yes.
And then figure out how to continue to promote this as what we have to do as a community.
Because she then becomes a symbol for
Right.
what good mental health and wellness
Yeah.
looks like. Say something about that from your household.
Well, we talked about it this morning about how the power of nonviolence transcends those types of attacks. And we discussed how staying above the fray and those attacks was difficult, but it showed mental health and it showed the strength that she had. But I want us to understand that sure, Carol has the ability and she's strong. We know that. But a lot of the strength that we take as a family, that we get as a unit, comes also from the interactions that we have with an Imani Bazzell or Tracy Parsons or whoever, Belden Fields, all the diverse group of people that we came in contact with who helped her stay that course and stay above that fray. But I do believe that there's something, there's several different things about this race and about the how we ran the race that should be studied and teased out,
Yes.
and then represented to our community so we can see the benefits of it
Absolutely.
and the shortcomings.
No, that's perfect, and that's what we've got Black Scholar activists for, right? So we're
Yes, indeed.
gonna stay on them, and we're gonna work with them, because as you and Tracy both say, we've got to document what works and what doesn't work. And we not only showed this community, but I think the nation, that this has been a model that can be replicated in other communities, because it was a truly diverse grassroots effort. And even people who we think are crazy, some people would say Tea Party people are just off their rockers, for instance, but many people came to that Tea Party movement and saw that as a grassroots organizing effort as well, maybe on the other side of the political spectrum, but they were as frustrated as people like us, for instance, with the powers that be. And for many people, it did start out as a grassroots effort. To a great extent, it's been bought by the Koch brothers now and others. But, you know, if we're going to have a true participatory democracy, the way we get there is through campaigns like the Ammons campaign. And before we get kicked off the air, Sam's giving me that eye. I need to say out loud to everyone that behind every good woman is a good man. And Brother Aaron, you have been a shining example of what a real man is, what a real man looks like, what a real man does. Because you weren't at all threatened by her glory. You were right there holding her up, speaking on her behalf, fighting for her, you know, in just such a mature and loving way. I think that needs to be studied also. Do you accept that?
I appreciate it. I absolutely do. Thank you very much.
That's why you called. That's why you called to get that right there. Wasn't it?
He knows I'm gonna cat him.
I think it might have been back there in my subconscious somewhere. I don't know. Hey, I love and appreciate both of y'all, and I will talk to y'all soon.
Thank
All
you
right,
so
bro.
much. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.
And Sam, we done? Okay, everybody. It's
Well,
so much fun, Tracy, always
I'll be
having you
back.
on.
I'll be back.
Last words, anything?
Yeah, just, you know, as a community, I think Aaron's call was real appropriate. You know, we see what we can do when we come together and put our minds to working towards our community, our families, our kids. and make that the focal point and the priority. So then all these other disturbances or these things that
oil off a duck's back,
distractions that people bring to you, it doesn't deter you.
Beautiful, beautiful. So y'all keep that in mind. We're going to keep growing healthy and strong. And until next week, let's keep holding hands. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to Access Live. Access Initiative is a trauma and justice-informed system of care. We're glad that you joined us today. Please join us every Wednesday at 2 p.m. for Access Live. Thank you and be well.